It's like, what were you doing with my drapes? The drapes that were hanging in the apartment. I never got the answer to that. Hi, this is Kari from Sky Properties, and today I want to talk a little bit about why it's a good idea to have a in-house maintenance or not to have in-house maintenance. And I would say as a management company, I started off thinking that having my own maintenance company would be a conflict of interest because I'm trying to make money with the maintenance company, yet I'm trying to save money as a management company. To begin with, I didn't have any of my own maintenance people, but eventually I had to because I needed to have better control of what was happening maintenance-wise at the buildings. And if you're just calling a vendor over the phone, they're not familiar with the building, you're getting bids, it's a lot of wasted time on trying to get things done rather than having someone on staff that can just get things done. Again, I did try to resist it for almost a decade. I did not have my own in-house staff. And then one by one, I needed to have someone that I could rely on and take them to fix this, that, the other. Be familiar with the buildings and their particular quirks. So I don't do it by buildings. I estimate that you need one full-time maintenance guy for every 80 units. And that does not include a plumbing, electrical, roofing, flooring. And it really doesn't matter how big your company is, so to speak. It depends on the age of your buildings. We start off just doing basic maintenance because no one can paint cheaper than the people out of the apartment books have painters in there for really inexpensive. But what I ended up finding was in the long run that it costed me more money because they're painting over things or they put one type of paint over another. They're spraying really fast and over doorknobs and outlets, and it's just not the kind of work that I wanted for my company and my apartments. Most of my properties are pride of ownership, so the older buildings, you have to be really careful not to ruin anything that's old, and on the newer properties, you don't want to paint over something that's in pristine condition. So there's a fine line. Now, many years later, I have on-staff painters, I have on-staff electrician, I have an on-staff plumbing people. And also it depends again on the age of your buildings and what you're doing. Right now we have a commercial building that keeps our electrician busy almost all 40 hours a week. So then prying him away from that to do some of our apartment stuff, it really does save those apartment owners a lot of money because he's always available pretty much. For me at Sky Properties, I try not to do anything that I know someone else can do cheaper. And for instance, LA Hydrojet, I simply can't compete with their prices for jetting out a line or clearing a stoppage. They're super reasonable, they're super knowledgeable, they come out quickly. I can't compete with that price. Plus, a lot of times, of course, stoppages only happen at the most inconvenient times, and that would usually be after hours. By then, my guys are on overtime, so then it also doesn't make sense. If I really need someone, my guys are familiar with the properties and they will come if we need them and clear a stoppage. They can. We just try not to do, again, what can be done cheaper by somebody else, because then I think it is a conflict of interest if I'm charging more than what we can get an outside contractor to do it for. This is what I find with owners. A lot of times they can do it a lot cheaper, but they make big mistakes in that they have a handyman that's not licensed or insured. The mistake happens when that person that they've hired makes a gigantic mistake that's not covered by their insurance. It's covered by your building's insurance. It can be very costly, even deadly if they, let's say they're putting you hire someone from Home Depot to put baseboards inside of your apartment unit and they hit, let's say, an AC line and that gas is leaking and someone dies from that. You need to be really careful. You don't want to step over dollars to pick up pennies. You want to be careful how you spend your money, and trying to be really cheap about maintenance is a lot of times where owners do try to do that, and I think it ends up costing them more in the long run. I got a client once because the client was in Beverly Hills, their buildings were in Beverly Hills, and they decided it would be a good idea to have their accountant manage their buildings. And what ended up happening was, for years and years, it was fantastic. They paid, I forget what they paid per month, but it wasn't very much for the accountant to do the books and to manage the building, take the phone calls. But what ended up happening was there was a major water leak in one of the units. The accountant, of course, having no property management experience whatsoever, fixed the leak and thought everything was honky-dory. That was it. Fast forward 12 months, the tenant's getting really sick, their cat died, and come to find out that there was, after the water intrusion, they didn't dry it properly, and there was a major mold infestation, and they had to put this woman up in a hotel. They had mold that had spread throughout the entire unit, and the unit below, above, below, beside. It was everywhere. It ended up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars just to put people up in hotels and to get it all out. And we worked it out. We worked out the numbers. Even though insurance ultimately covered a lot of it, they still had out-of-pocket expenses. And part of that was because they didn't require their tenants to have renter's insurance, which they should have done, and that would have saved them a ton. But this expense of putting everything back together, the amount they saved in paying an accountant and not a property manager ended up being way more. And that accountant, of course, quit because he was going to be sued.